So today I'm really thrilled to be meeting up with Michael Garcia. And as I just shared with Michael, every person's journey as far as attuning to their authenticity and listening for what that inner truth is so unique and different. And I'd really love to get a sense of how your journey's unfolded. Is that a cool starting off point?
It is.
Okay. Hey!
Hello.
Hello! Nice of you to join
Elijah,
us!
come on, if you want some kombucha, mister, right now.
This is great!
Our guest,
Elijah,
special
do you want
guest
to be
star.
under? Yes, special guest.
Hang on.
In
all hell is about to break loose.
Oh, this is good. Hello! Hello! Oh!
That's maybe too much
This is great!
for them. Hey,
You're like a big
who wants
cousin.
kombucha?
Yeah.
And cookie and pizza?
Huh? Kombucha?
Come on.
Do you like
Let's
kombucha?
go. Let's go get our kombucha.
She does.
I'm just gonna go ahead and I'll have to drink Elijah's. You can have Elijah's kombucha. It's okay.
Uh-oh.
Bye.
I would love to hear about some of the influences in retrospect, looking back,
Yeah.
that really nourished your listening to your authenticity and your attunement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, now that you're an adult, looking like and having engaged in the practice, from what I perceive of you,
Mm-hmm.
as really listening for that inner truth.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as having been those real nourishing influences during your upbringing?
That's an interesting question because I think if I go way back to the beginning, I was brought up in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know if this is a common experience, but for me, there was something about it that wasn't, when you talk about attunement, it wasn't quite hitting me in the right square in the heart, the way that I felt like there should be something, I should be really feeling something here, and I wasn't really feeling it. And I think my first experience outside of the church was as a teenager. I think I was 15 when I first read a book called A Fire in the Mind, which was a biography of Joseph Campbell.
Oh.
And it really blew me away. And then I read the book by Alan Watts, and the two of those guys together pretty much veered me into a whole other trajectory.
Yeah.
Because I thought all of a sudden I was feeling something that I had been looking for,
Right.
and I felt like I had found it, at least the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so essentially, I'd say as an influence, that was the first thing that really set me off.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. What was it about that biography of Joseph Campbell and the companion for you, the Alan Watts influence? What was it about receiving what it is that they were communicating that really, resonated so deeply?
I think the first thing with the Campbell biography, it was really about, I would say the theme of his life really was following his bliss. Right?
Of course.
And, it's something that we hear so often, but I had never heard that phrase before reading this book. So when I heard it, it was like, wait a second, is this even possible? Is it possible to live a life where you're following your bliss? And, I remember early, it followed his life from the beginning to the end. And I remember early on in his life, he was setting out on this journey. He was a jazz musician at Columbia, in Columbia University and all this New York sort of life. And he set out to head west, and he packed up his car. And I remember him saying, "Hail, thou forth, thou flivver, companion to the unknownness of my future." He was going forth into the unknown, but was really brave about it. And every step of the way, everything he did was following his bliss. And so I got to see what it looked like to have a whole life of being guided, being present, following the things that really sort of excited him. And I thought, well, maybe that's possible for me too.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
So The Watts book, the thing that struck me about Watts is essentially what he was saying in that book was, there's no suitable manual for me to leave my kids to teach them what's really important. So I'm going to write the book, and this is it. This is everything that you need to know. And the way that he distilled and brought in Eastern philosophy and Hinduism and Zen and everything, just put it all in one place. Those were conversations that, wow, I mean, they really blew me away. I also, in the Joseph Campbell story, you know, he was hanging with people, you know, Steinbeck and Jiddu Krishnamurti and people that then I started to pick up and follow their trails.
I see.
And so he became like the center of this wheel that started to open up for me.
Yeah.
So.
That's great, Michael. So in following that kind of inner mantra or guidance about following your bliss, can you share a bit about your kind of the early chapter of entering the entertainment field, and whether it was challenging or what your experience was in following that guidance of follow your bliss as you were starting out in the entertainment profession?
I would say.
I'm sorry. Did you start out at Fox?
I did.
In comedy development.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 20th Century Fox. I would say that I maybe was naively confident.
Okay.
When I showed up.
Yeah.
Because in the following my bliss, I had made up a way to do this. It seemed like a really good plan at the time. When I was not living here, I was on the East Coast in college and was like, okay, I'm going to move out to Hollywood and I'll call the guys that graduated from my university and ask them for a meeting and, and somehow end up with a job out of that. So I moved here and I had all these names of very high level famous people here and I was calling them and people were taking messages. I didn't even know that there were assistants at that time. It's like somebody's answering the phone and it's like, oh, can I speak with, Mr. X?
Right.
It's like, well, he'll call you back. Okay.
Yeah.
And I sat for a week and nobody called me back. And I was used to, you call somebody and they personally pick up the phone and they say, Anyway, I sat there and after a few days I thought, oh boy, this is a terrible plan. Because I based everything on this idea that I could just waltz in here and call some people and they would meet me. They did call me. So that's the thing. That was the
thing.
They did call. They did.
Eventually they called you.
On like the 8th day, they started calling me back.
Wow.
And so it turns out that it actually was a good plan.
Yeah.
And for a few days though, I had some doubt. It just seemed to me like the thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that may be to your point. There's a big conversation I've been in lately, which is around intuition. And listening and trusting that voice that's inside that's saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. It's like the movie Yes Man. I think we may have talked about this before. I just watched it again recently, and it's really such a deep movie because we get messages all the time.
We do.
Whether or not we obey them is really the question. So an easy way to get in the practice of it is just saying yes to everything, and then seeing how that sort of turns into something. Anyway, they did call me back. I started meeting around. Within a month, I had a job at 20th Century Fox that was well above the level I should have had, having never answered a phone or scheduled a meeting or anything like that. Right. And I was an assistant to one of the executives in the comedy department, and I still remember what I said to him because I had no experience, and he said, well, what do you think this job is about? And I said, as far as I can tell, I'm here to be your studio guardian angel. That was your response? That's what I said to him. I said, everything that comes to you comes through me, and everything that comes from you comes through me, and I'll do anything that you need anytime you want, no questions. And that was it, and that was our relationship, and I had really a great relationship with my boss at that time, and it was hard learning it for the first few months, but eventually it was like the springboard for everything else I was going to do.
Yeah.
So,
that sense of being of service, I think maybe the reason why that comes to me when I hear you responding in that way is, I remember you were sharing kind of how you approached your role at HBO. So you went from being an assistant at Fox Comedy to industry.
Yeah.
It was a management production company.
Yeah.
Right, for
Yeah.
several years, was it?
I was there for 2 years. Yeah.
And then from there you went to HBO.
Yeah.
And at HBO, eventually you were developing all the dramas there, from 6 Feet Under all the way up to, I think, the beginning phases of Boardwalk Empire, right?
Yeah, I didn't develop 6 Feet Under, but when I came, the shows that were on the air were Sopranos, 6 Feet Under, and The Wire had just started, its first episode, when I showed up.
I see.
So I basically jumped in midstream on Sopranos and 6 Feet Under and worked on those shows, you know.
During your tenure, yeah.
Yeah, actually, I actually also did a little bit on Oz. The final season of Oz was also on the air, but I really didn't have anything to do with that. But yeah, I started with The Wire, and then Carnival, and then the first casting session I was in. The first script I actually got was Deadwood.
Wow.
That was the first one that came in fresh when I was there. And, you know, then did Big Love, and then True Blood, and Boardwalk Empire and Treme were both, those are the last two things that I worked on.
I see.
I was there for the pilot of Treme in New Orleans and finished through the filming of that, and then developed the first 3 scripts of Boardwalk before it ended up shooting.
I see.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's an incredible run.
Yeah, it was great.
It was kind of a golden era, really, for I mean.
It was, man. I'm telling you, it was amazing. Like, it's something I'll always look back on and say, because I remember walking in, it was just on the verge. I call it Act 2 of HBO, because the first act was establishing itself as a powerful entity in the business, but then it became, well, how do you proliferate that?
Right.
How do you take that to the next level?
Right.
And that's right when I walked in.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff that was just happening. Chris Albrecht had just been promoted to CEO.
I see.
Carolyn had just been promoted to president, and people were like, okay,
Yeah.
let's go do this now.
Yeah.
You know, and we were really building something.
Yeah. So the foundation was set, and now it's like, how do we really use this? I mean, it sounds like you guys almost had a mandate to really take risks and be bold.
Well, you know what we used to say? This was something that Chris Albrecht used to say. He said, let's not try to replicate our hits. Let's try to replicate the process that led to the hits.
Wow, that's great.
Which is like, that really made so much sense, because instead of chasing your tail, you're actually creating a space for. It's sort of like it was almost like tending a garden. You know, he's like, let's just keep the garden nourished and weeded and ready for new seeds.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
let's not try and make another rose. Let's just make
Right.
the soil right so that maybe a beautiful lily will grow.
Right.
But the point is, they'll all be beautiful.
Sure.
You know?
So that's a great segue, because I'm always interested in the process that people have, the practices, right? Particularly when it comes to living a life of integrity with oneself. Really, there are certain practices and you know, just a focus on the journey rather than kind of what's going to come out of it. I mean, what comes out of it comes out of it.